Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Congressional District 16 Candidates Forum for the November 5th, 2024 general election. I'm Sigrid Pinsky, a member of the League of Women Voters of Palo Alto, and I will be moderating this forum tonight, which is co-hosted by the Silicon Valley Central Chamber of Commerce and the Silicon Valley Chamber Coalition. And I've got Ms. Bhatia to introduce herself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Harbir Bhatia. I am the CEO of the Silicon Valley Central Chamber of Commerce and a member of the Silicon Valley Coalition of Chambers. We have many chambers supporting this and promoting this event tonight because they are very keen on ensuring that matters of economy are discussed and covered. As we know, economy considers many elements, and we realize a dependency amongst all those elements. And we believe it's very important for the business community, the broader community, and all residents to be able to hear from our candidates to decide for themselves who they would like to vote for. So we're really grateful and excited to partner with the League of Women Voters here with us today, and I will pass it off back to them so they can continue the moderation.
Thank you very much. This forum is co-sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Cupertino Sunnyvale, Los Altos Mountain View, San Jose Santa Clara, Southwest Santa Clara Valley, South San Mateo County, and North and Central San Mateo County. The League of Women Voters is a nationwide organization founded in 1920 after women got the right to vote. The League envisions a democracy where every person has the desire, the right, the knowledge, and the confidence to participate. The League is nonpartisan, meaning that we neither support nor oppose candidates or parties. Our organization has two distinct roles. One is advocacy for public policy issues that we have studied and developed positions on. The other is voter service, which brings voters impartial information on issues and candidates. Voter service is the hat we're wearing tonight in presenting this forum, where you get to learn about the candidates running to represent you in Congressional District 16. Those candidates are, in alphabetical order, Sam Liccardo and Evan Lowe. As is the League's usual practice, this is a forum, not a debate. There is no rebuttal, and we do not allow any personal attacks. Candidates have been asked to focus on their own campaign. The candidates have also agreed to participate under written guidelines that were developed for this forum. Also, because this is a Zoom webinar, only the candidates and the moderator will have their microphones activated. This forum is being posted to the League YouTube channel. You can find the link on our website, which is lwvpaloalto.org. Note that whenever the recording is aired, it must be shown in its entirety to ensure that no candidate statements are taken out of context. All candidates have agreed to that requirement. So before we begin, let me explain that this forum has a somewhat unique format. Due to scheduling difficulties, we are asking the same questions of each candidate separately. The interviews are then being edited together to resemble a live forum. As in a live forum, we'll be keeping time with a computer stopwatch, and I will remind candidates to respect time limits because I do enforce them. In lieu of opening statements, I will ask each candidate to give a 1.5-minute description of their qualifications to hold this office. We will then go to a question period. Candidates will have up to 1.5 minutes to answer each question. Questions for this forum have been solicited in advance from all of those who signed up to attend the originally scheduled forum. In lieu of closing statements, for the final question, we will ask, what question do you wish we had asked in this forum that we didn't ask? This gives candidates an opportunity to highlight an issue or a legislative area that they think deserves more attention. Each candidate will be allowed 1.5 minutes to answer the closing question in reverse order of the opening question. So the opening question is, please describe your qualifications to serve in this office. Mr. Liccardo, please go. Yes.
Thanks to the League of Women Voters for hosting this forum. I grew up in this district. I'm proud to have served as a criminal prosecutor, sexual assault crimes here in Santa Clara County, to have served as an educator at Stanford Law School, and of course, as mayor of the city of San Jose. The Mercury News' editorial board opinion that came out this morning says much about what distinguishes the candidates in this race. They have joined the Palo Alto Daily, the San Mateo Daily Journal, the San Francisco Chronicle. Every single daily newspaper that's weighed into this race has endorsed me over my opponent. And that is for a simple reason. I have taken on powerful groups to get things done. I have launched the nation's largest community choice energy utility to supplant PG&E and provide electricity that's 95% GHG free and 8% cheaper to our 1 million residents. I've taken on powerful gun groups by pioneering the boldest gun violence prevention legislation in the nation. I've overcome powerful developers on 3 separate ballot measures to preserve hillsides and open space, including Coyote Valley. I've expanded accountability over our police with our independent police auditor, despite the vociferous opposition of a police union. And I've gotten results. In my final year in office, we had 2022, we reduced street homelessness by 11%. We had the lowest homicide rate of any major city in the country. And I left my successor a $30 million surplus. We need to bring that kind of accountability to Congress.
Thank you. And now I'd like to welcome Mr. Lowe.
Thank you very much. Well, for those of you who have not had the pleasure to meet, my name is Evan Lowe, and I was born and raised here in Silicon Valley and served as mayor and city council member for the city of Campbell, now concluding my 10th year in the California State Legislature in the California State Assembly. In those various capacities, helped to chair issues and committees similar to that of the Elections Committee in the California State Legislature, partnering with the League of Women Voters on election integrity, bills and proposals that I've authored, like Election Day as a holiday, helping ensure that we have increasing access to voter participation, partnered with the League of Women Voters to provide policy proposals on lowering the voting age to 17.5. And of course, this is a joint partnership with the Chamber of Commerce as well, too. And my very first job was at the Campbell Chamber of Commerce, as my father was also past president of the Chamber of Commerce. And now as I head to Congress, I am the only candidate in this race that is endorsed by the California Democratic Party, as well as teachers, firefighters, nurses, and many other labor unions. I'm going to Congress to help answer the next call for service and continuing the legacy of service from Congresswoman Anna Eshoo, who served with distinction in tackling the fundamental issue of addressing the rising cost of living and helping uplift the middle class. And I know that how many conversations moving forward. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Now it's time to go to the questions we've gathered from our registrants. Mr. Lowe, what's an important California issue for which we need bipartisan support to achieve change? And how would you go about getting that support? You have a minute and a half.
Well, this is also about understanding that we live in an increasingly, seemingly polarized society, but partnership over partisanship is important. And I have that legislative experience. In the California State Legislature, I was named the most prolific lawmaker by the Sacramento Bee because of the type of bills that I've passed, the number of bills, and that also required bipartisan support. I've had experience. For example, we'll be voting this November on Proposition 3 to enshrine constitutional protections for marriage equality, the right to marry, the fundamental right to marry. But back in 2008, Proposition 8 eliminated the rights of same-sex couples to marry. During that period of time, Republicans were party line votes in opposition. Whereas today, as I introduced and authored this legislation on marriage equality in our state constitution, this received not a single no vote from Republicans. I want to repeat that. Not a single Republican voted no in the legislature to put this before the ballot. In addition, I also partnered in partnership and conversation with the Church of Latter-day Saints, the Mormon Church, and also the Catholic Conference in seeking allyship. Their foreign position is neutral, not opposed like previous years before. And that, again, reflects the type of work that I have done and what I will continue to do by finding commonality and also connecting with each and every individual on the basic human capacity and having the type of healing. That's what I'll do in Congress.
Thank you. Mr. Liccardo.
Well, California is suffering from a housing crisis. That's no secret. And I identify the housing crisis because when we're looking for bipartisanship, we really need to find some of those backwater policy issues. We know where the parties are going to clash. It's going to be in the headlines. So we have to find the interstices between those battles where we can actually get things done. And housing is an area where, frankly, Congress has not legislated significantly in the last 3 decades. I've got an online book, samlicaro.com. You can see it's 80 pages. It's actually growing every week with specific ideas about how we can tackle many of these challenges. For example, the housing crisis, how we could use an expanded new markets tax credit that could incentivize the transformation of millions of square feet of vacant office buildings, hotels and retail buildings into housing. And in fact, we can rent restrict some of those units, and some of the units can be market rate, but we critically need to incentivize these transformations of these buildings. And this is precisely at a moment when we have a great opportunity to do that, when there is so much vacancy. I talk about how we can streamline the low-income housing tax credit, be much more effective for nonprofit builders who are trying to build affordable housing, particularly in smaller communities that lack additional resources. Unlike San Jose, that could find other sources. Today, developers need in California 6 or 7 different levels of financing. We need a streamlined low-income housing tax credit. And we need to provide federally backed financing for homeowners who want to build backyard homes and what we call ADUs, provide more naturally affordable housing for our workforce.
Thank you. The next question, how would you address the availability and affordability of insurance in the face of the increasing risks caused by climate change? Mr. Liccardo.
Well, insurance is a policy area that is entirely regulated by the state of California. And I would submit, I don't think California has done a very good job of regulating it. What we can do at the federal level is, I believe, trying to help homeowners and business owners, small business owners and apartment owners reduce risk on their properties. And here's what I mean by that. We could provide federally backed financing combined with local program known as PACE that we could federalize that enables property owners, homeowners to be able to put the cost of improvements on their property rather than on their own personal liability sheet. So that when they want to make improvements to their home, for example, to replace wood shingle roofs, to make them help them get a lower insurance rate for fire insurance, or perhaps make them eligible for insurance if they're not able to get it. Or maybe if they want to install sprinklers on their ceilings, or maybe they want to clear defensible space around their homes, they can make those investments, put the debt on their home, and if they choose to sell their home in 3 or 4 years, then the debt with the improvement goes with the home through PACE. And with federally backed lending, as we have with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, which is already helping tens of millions of homeowners get into their first home, we can provide a mechanism for homeowners to access a financing at a much lower cost. We have to do what we can to help communities empower themselves against these higher insurance rates and give them more options.
Thank you. Mr. Lowe.
Well, we know that the issue at hand, especially here at home in this district, that climate change, this is a climate crisis, an unfortunate lived experience in this reality. In fact, as we were talking here in October, close to 100-degree temperatures in October, and we seem to be living out Groundhog's Day every single year in which we hear record-breaking temperatures. So this is a reality that we're living in which in our communities we're seeing that natural disasters is a reoccurring theme, and the insurance companies have left California. Now it's imperative at the state level we make sure that we bring them back to making sure that there is coverage that is affordable, but that is comprehensive. Those are the key components that we are tackling with in real time at the state level, but also at the federal level. I'm very inspired to be going to Congress to partner with Congressman Adam Schiff, future Senator Adam Schiff, for his Insure Act for All, making sure that we have wide coverage because this is a necessity. And it's not just about coverage, but making sure that it, again, is affordable for ratepayers and is comprehensive in that approach. Otherwise, we won't have future generations of Californians being able to obtain the California American dream like everyone else.
Thank you. Mr. Lowe, next question. Will you co-sponsor the House Medicare for All Act, HR 3421, when it gets reintroduced? Why or why not?
Yes, I absolutely will. And that's why I'm also proud to be the only candidate in this race endorsed by the National Nurses Association because of my advocacy and making sure that we have continued access to healthcare. I mean, also the only candidate in this race that is endorsed by the California Alliance of Retired Americans. That's the key core fundamental principle that I've experienced and that I've worked on in the California State Legislature, which is to increase as much access as possible, not just for seniors, but for all. And that's what I'll do in Congress to make sure that we get to that point. But again, I don't want to give false promises, but it is the values, the core, at understanding how we can be deliberative in that approach and getting to universal access. And that's what I'm committed to doing in Congress.
Thank you. Mr. Liccardo.
Yes, I certainly support having the public option that is available, and will do everything I can to support it. I think we have to ask ourselves, though, what do we do in a world with a divided Congress, which I think is what we're likely to be left with based on what we're seeing right now in key Senate races like John Tester's in Montana. We're probably going to lose the Senate, even if we get the House. That is, as Democrats. So we need to find those things we can do that we can get Republican support for as well if we're going to expand access and affordability of healthcare. So in my book online, again, samliccardo.com, you can see some of those ideas. I talk about, for example, reducing the barriers to telehealth. We need to make sure telehealth is fully reimbursable under Medicaid and Medicare. It expires soon. And we need to overcome some of those state barriers that prevent folks from practicing across state lines with essentially federal preemption. Now, I think that's going to be important for a lot of Republicans who want to see red rural areas better served by primary care. They're currently in medical deserts. But it's going to be critical for us, all of us, and particularly as we think about reproductive care and the opportunity to provide reproductive care in red states. I also talk about how we can expand primary care, how we can better enforce antitrust laws against pharmacy benefit managers. The PBMs are making huge markups on pharmaceuticals. There's a lot of ideas that I have in that book that really focus on what we can get done in this divided Congress.
Thank you. All right, our next question. Congressional District 16 includes many wealthy communities, but there are areas throughout the district that are distinctly lower income and demographically very different. Have you visited these communities to find out their concerns during your campaign? And how will you serve them if you are elected? Mr. Liccardo.
Thank you. Yeah, I think, the areas of greatest concern around poverty is first area, large portion of central and east San Jose that I have been very responsible for in governing and I have a close relationship with, obviously, as mayor of the city. So I know it very well. I spend many hundreds of hours in those communities. That's why I worked incredibly hard as mayor, for example, to launch free broadband to 200,000 East Side residents in partnership with the school district. Why I launched free after school and summer learning programs in 16 of our poorest neighborhoods, while we launched, for example, really expansive, innovative program for college scholarships for nearly 2,000 low-income first-generation students in East San Jose that now has been taken on by Boys and Girls Club, a whole host of programs focusing on providing greater opportunity for many struggling families in East San Jose. And then the other area of great concern is the South Coast side, where I know we have certainly a farm worker community. I'm Latino myself. I care passionately about their plight. I'm proud to be supported by the Coastside Democrats, and I've spent a lot of time with nonprofit leaders there in the last few months, and I expect I'll spend even more time in the years ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Lowe.
Yes, thank you very much. This campaign has provided me the opportunity, while also serving in the California State Legislature as a full-time job, also campaigning. But even given those experiences, I've had time to go to sitting in city council meetings, the Woodside Town Council meeting, the Half Moon Bay Council meetings, going throughout the entire districts, whether it be Los Altos Hills, or whether it be in Little Saigon, or that of Atherton. And of course, you referenced this so perfectly, which it almost is like a tale of two cities, but this is within the congressional district. And that is what is so important, to not lose sight of making sure that our member of Congress fights for those who are disenfranchised and underserved, That is the guiding moral compass that I bring to this experience. By the way, and I also mentioned that that was a key core tenet of addressing and tackling that of the middle class. How do we make sure that we're tackling not just a living wage, not just a minimum wage, but a living wage? How do we make sure that we're addressing housing affordability? You mentioned it earlier, equal access to housing and healthcare, and also education. That's what I've done in the California State Legislature. As a product of De Anza Community College, I have voted and helped make community college free and accessible in the state of California. I'll do the same thing in Congress, making sure that we lower barriers to entry for all of the socioeconomic opportunities for everyday Americans, and that's what I'll do in Congress.
Thank you. Next question. Do you support the Homes Act, which would offer a public option to meet the housing needs of people not served by the private market? What other approaches would you propose to alleviate the nationwide shortage of affordable housing for low and moderate income households? Mr. Lowe.
Well, it's also, number one, the value statement. I think it is unconscionable that one needs to earn close to $300,000 to afford a single-family home in this congressional district, one of the most expensive zip codes to live in our country. And so this is about the American values that previous generations have had opportunity and access. So this requires the sense of urgency at this period of time. So in the state level, we have provided records amount of funding. In fact, I've been in this capacity helping deliver close to $2 billion to both San Mateo and Santa Clara counties and throughout the state of California, directly going to resources on affordable housing to local cities. But it's not just enough just to simply throw money at the problem. We need to see systemic changes in having the type of growth and development consistent with the general plans to be able to build accordingly, while also assessing in real time the barriers to development for the private sector. And in Congress, I'll do exactly that, helping to get the resources, the budget augmentations, partnering with the Housing and Urban Development to make sure that we have the type of financial assistance vis-a-vis the housing vouchers, and also the type of tax credits in getting first-time home buyers into their homes. This is a multi-pronged approach, but that's why I'm so excited to be on this Democratic Party ticket with future President Kamala Harris in supporting her proposal for $25,000 tax credits for first-time new home buyers.
Mr. Liccardo.
Yeah, I haven't read the Homes Act, so I'm not familiar enough to be able to opine specifically on it. What we critically need is a substantial expansion of supply, and obviously supply, particularly of affordable housing. I mentioned a few of the ideas in a recent question, in response to a recent question. I guess I would maybe expand on those. For example, the low-income housing tax credit, I believe, is a tool that is the primary tool relied on by nonprofit builders in this country. It is incredibly expensive, and it is, frankly, not very accessible for an awful lot of folks in small communities that don't have many other sources of financing, because it now requires as many as 7 or 8 different layers in the capital stack, and that's just too difficult for builders. So we need a streamlined low-income housing tax credit to boost the credit from 9% to perhaps 13% that enables folks to get a shovel in the ground simply with a single allocation. Secondly, I think we need vastly more vouchers. There's no question that our communities are underserved by vouchers. About 2.5 million families today depend on Section 8 vouchers and VASH vouchers. We need 4 times that number just to meet the need of extremely low income and very low income families in our country. And so we've got to do everything we can to expand the use of vouchers and to make those vouchers more flexible. Right now, for example, we cannot house unhoused people in quick build housing that San Jose and Mountain View have been building, and very successfully. We cannot actually use those vouchers in many of those innovative housing programs.
Thank you. Next question. As a representative of Congress, what is one specific thing you would do to move unhoused people into stable housing? Mr. Liccardo.
Well, I'll pick up where I left off. The Section 8 voucher program requires that any individual that is housed with a Section 8 voucher can only be housed in what's called permanent housing. And that's a good thing. We want more permanent housing. What we know that permanent housing costs in the Bay Area is about $950,000 per unit to build, and it takes 5 or 6 years to build an apartment building. That is not going to be a solution for a region. If you just look at San Mateo County and Santa Clara County alone, has 10,000 unhoused residents. That's a $10 billion problem if we go at it at the same old way. So in San Jose, we tried a lot of different innovative solutions. In 2016, we started converting motels to apartments. 4 years before Gavin Newsom made it a statewide program, we were the pioneers in that. We started tiny homes. That didn't work that well, but what really worked well were prefabricated housing, these modular units that we could put on land that, for example, Caltrans didn't want to be near freeways, and we could build very quickly in a matter of months rather than years, and we could build at $80,000 or $100,000 a unit rather than $950,000. And what we showed is that in 1 year, in 2022, because we had expanded these programs over 2 years, we had reduced street homelessness by 11% in the city of San Jose when it was going up everywhere else in the county. The problem is we couldn't use Section 8 vouchers for anybody housed there. So even though Mountain View and Redwood City and other cities were following our model, they were also stuck because they couldn't use vouchers to actually pay for operations and drug treatment and other critical services at these facilities. We need a more flexible voucher system.
Thank you. Mr. Love.
Your question was, how do we move unstable individuals into
unhoused people into stable housing?
I think part of the challenge is to make sure that when we think about temporary, how do we get into permanent? So when we think about housing, a wide variety of different segments within our various communities, whether it be individuals that are unhoused and also have mental health challenges, maybe those who are unhoused, unsheltered, who have challenges in getting economic security via job. So all of these things are intertwined. But what is important is that we take the sense of urgency. And I referenced this earlier. In the state of California, there was actually an audit specifically calling out the city of San Jose because the state of California, we were giving records amount of resources and funding to the city of San Jose. But the auditor and the auditor's report came up with the findings that there was no measurable results about getting individuals housed permanently, permanent housing solutions, and we're throwing money at the problem. So in fact, we had to change state law and making sure that we have the metrics for cities. If they are beneficiaries of resources, we need to see those metrics. So I'm hopeful with this new law, we will see funding go also with deliverable metrics that can be measured throughout the process and helping to identify what projects validate the type of funding for permanent housing solutions while also making sure that we tackle these other issues as well.
Thank you. Next question. Congressmember Zoe Lofgren has sponsored H.R. 8433, which would expand eligibility for the registry program under which certain undocumented immigrants can apply for a green card. First, where do you stand on H.R. 8433? And second, what additions or alternatives would you propose to accomplish comprehensive immigration reform?
Well, I would be in support of my fellow colleague leading our California delegation. She has served with distinction and has been a trusted member and a go-to member of Congress on immigration reform and also the totality of the spirit of Silicon Valley. So I would be a partner and look forward to doing so. Similarly, the notion of comprehensive immigration reform, as you may know, there was a comprehensive proposal, bipartisan in Congress, but unfortunately, Mr. Trump said we do not want to see any action. I'd be in full support of passing that law. But similarly, though, and this is what I also bring to the table, is making sure that we're looking at other opportunities and addressing the issue of immigration reform with respect to families. Now, how do we help expedite the type of processes in place for interviews? We need to also make sure that we have the time extensions that are feasible, that if an individual loses their job and all of a sudden gets just but a few months to leave, we need to make sure that they have a true opportunity. I also think that we should help create greater funding mechanisms for our consulates to help expedite the waiting process. There are efficiencies that can be implemented with the current existing programs in addition to the comprehensive immigration reform. But that would be a keen focus of mine and making sure that we're reevaluating the existing programs and finding out how to shorten the timeline and making the current system more efficient.
Thank you. Mr. Liccardo.
Yeah, again, I haven't read the legislation, but I can tell you I support any and all efforts to help our undocumented neighbors become permanent residents and citizens where they've been complying with the law in every other way. And we need to provide a pathway for them. I am Latino. I've married a Latino woman. I understand and live in a community literally with undocumented residents on my block who are building businesses and communities and families. And they have been living here for decades and they deserve a path. And I'm proud that I was the first mayor in the country to launch a lawsuit against the Trump administration over DACA, over what he attempted to do to DACA. In any event, what I propose is trying to do more in a divided Congress to get folks together around a work-focused immigration program. We know Republicans aren't going to jump on right away when we talk about providing a pathway for undocumented immigrants. But if we can talk about the specific industries we know, and there are many, many industries that desperately need more workers, more skilled workers at all levels, I think we can provide a pathway that combines both border safety and security with an expanded legal path of immigration, both for people who are here today, as well as the many people we need to continue to come here to drive innovation in our valley and to drive our country forward. We critically need more immigration. The way we're going to do it is by pairing both the border security with a more liberal immigration policy.
Thank you. Next question. We regulate many innovations such as medicines, chemicals, foods, and cars to make sure they're safe and that companies are held accountable for harms they cause. Isn't it time we do the same for AI and other digital technologies? How can a slow-moving Congress keep up with this fast-moving industry? Mr. Liccardo.
I think that's an excellent question because the truth is we've been waiting for 30 years for Congress to pass, a data privacy bill, which still hasn't made its way to the floor. We haven't seen any revisions to Section 230, the Communications Act that was passed in 1996, that will address many of the big challenges we're having now around child safety and everything else we know about our platforms and the lack of content moderation. Here's what I think about AI. First, I think we need to get a data privacy bill over the goal line. I think most experts believe that's a baseline for the next steps. And so we can provide basic protections for folks over the use of their own data. And then secondly, we need to push hard on transparency. And that requires, for example, mandating that there be watermarks on AI-generated images and voice and text so people can clearly identify what's generated AI. And we need to ban those sites which are clearly have no purpose other than the sexualization of living people. We know how that's being used, particularly against girls in high schools, and it's terrible. So let's have some basic transparency mandates. And then let's update all of our existing criminal statutes around things like fraud to ensure that we're capturing behavior that people are engaging in using AI. Because the truth is, Congress is not going to be competent in regulating the software, the code. They're not going to be competent in regulating how LLMs are being deployed or what their data sources are. We need to focus on the outcomes and the effects. That's where Congress can be effective.
Thank you. Mr. Lowe.
Well, I'm so glad that you asked that question. This is the heart of Silicon Valley. And in the California State Legislature, I founded the Technology and Innovation Caucus, which did not form before until I got to the legislature, to do exactly that, making sure that we are up to date, that we're providing the framework for consumer protection, protecting everyday Californians and Americans, while also supporting the innovation economy. And we know that oftentimes these technologies advance so quickly by the time government catches up on the regulatory framework, the technology has already advanced. So what is important is that we partner with the technologists and the private sector in helping to identify some key core principles and values, which is to say of how do we just the impact positively or negatively on the future work vis-a-vis the displacement of jobs. How do we make sure that for government, we understand that this could look at the placement of jobs and workers? How do we help protect and or retrain, reskill, and provide skill sets to the future workforce if they will be phased out over this period of time? How do we also make sure that we're thinking about consumer protection? We know with issues like keeping our children safe from addiction in real time. And AI is a buzzword, but it's used in so much of our everyday lives. But I think there's specific components that we must do in helping to reflect the basic protections that exist.
Thank you. Next question. Given that passenger cars produce a major portion of greenhouse gas emissions, and that moving to electric vehicles alone will not meet stated greenhouse gas reduction targets, do you support shifting federal funding on highways to transit and other non-car methods of transportation? Why or why not? And please be specific.
Thank you. Yes, I support, I mean, all options should be on the table. So first part of the premise of the statement and the question. I'm proud of what we've done in California. We've led the way in the nation with respect to this effort on getting clean renewable energy. I was there when we passed the legislative proposal and the law on zero emission vehicles being sold in the state of California by 2035. And not just that, I was there on supporting SB 100, getting off of a fossil fuel clean electric grid by 2045. But we need to make sure that this is an economy that thrives for everyone. While we might be privileged to have charging stations and electric vehicles here in Silicon Valley in the Bay Area, I well know even here in California, in the Central Valley or in Bakersfield, the infrastructure does not similarly exist. And so it is important that we're looking from an equity lens on how we can advance these issues collectively. Your other question about looking at other alternatives and utilizing federal funds going elsewhere, I think all options should be on the table. But key core principle of our goal, how do we make sure that we maintain our goals similar to what we've done in California? I want to see reflected in the United States Congress, but then also from an equity lens. We can't just shove it down. We must bring all communities on board. I reference this as a just transition, transition that is just for all. For everyone from various socioeconomic backgrounds. And that's what will be important, imperative in making sure that we also strengthen the workforce as well.
Thank you. Next question. Given that passenger cars produce a major portion of greenhouse gas emissions, and that moving to electric vehicles alone will not meet stated greenhouse gas reduction targets, do you support shifting federal funding on highways to transit and other non-car methods of transportation? Why or why not? Please be specific. Mr. Liccardo.
Yes, I do. And I'm proud to be endorsed by the Sierra Club, by the California environmental voters, by the League Conservation Voters. In fact, every single environmental organization that's weighed in this race is supporting me, 350 Bay Area, et cetera, because I have a very strong track record of environmental leadership. Excuse me. What I think we need to do, in addition, certainly to what you described, and by the way, I've advocated for that certainly at the local and regional level. I was on the board of the MTC, and we pushed very hard in my city for ensuring we could use dollars, for example, for expansive protective bike lanes, and for better pedestrian connections, and obviously for transit projects. I worked very hard in Washington, D.C. to bring dollars for Caltrain's electrification and expansion of its operations to get Measure RR on the ballot in 2020, worked very hard regionally with partners, and then, of course, bringing BART to Silicon Valley, which we were successful in doing in 2018. So I'm going to continue to do that. I'm going to push hard for transit dollars. But I think there's a lot more we need to do beyond transportation. We've got, for example, 99% of the buildings that need to be retrofitted in order to move away from fossil fuels to electrification and renewables. And what I propose in the book is, for example, providing federally backed financing and PACE financing to those homeowners and others who want to invest in the panels, in the batteries and other things. We need to do much more. It's certainly transportation's a start.
Thank you. Next question. What can and should Congress do to bring all parties to the negotiating table and end the current conflict in the Middle East? Mr. Liccardo.
Well, I think I'd be lying if I told people that as a first-term member of the House of Representatives, we're going to have an enormous amount of influence in the outcome of what happens there. It's overwhelmingly driven by the executive branch. But it seems to me there are things that Congress can do. First, foremost, we can do everything we can to support the administration's efforts at a peace agreement. And we know that has been failing for no fault of the administrations. Obviously, we can't get Sinwar to the table, and Netanyahu has also made a lot of demands that have changed, and that's not been helpful. So we probably need to come up with some alternative solutions, for example, how we protect the Philadelphia corridor without having IDF forces in Gaza for an extended period of time. We need to start finding solutions, and that may require some funding. Similarly, it's going to require some funding, again, from Congress to support, for example, an expansion of the Lebanese army so Lebanese can take their country back from Hezbollah. I think that's going to be critical, for example, in that space between the Israeli border and the Litani River, to have the Lebanese army controlling that space and preventing Hezbollah from occupying it. Obviously, the UN forces have done no good in that regard. And we've got to provide that defensible space by supporting the existing Lebanese government, which has been in tatters. So that's going to take funding as well. We've got to bring Arab allies together, moderate Arab allies, to help support these efforts, and Congress is going to have to put in $1 or $2.
Thank you. Mr. Lowe.
This is very important for us on the moral clarity that exists. Number one, the foundations. It is our role of the United States to promote, protect, and preserve democracies abroad. And this is no different from my allies in Israel, in the Middle East. This is no different from Ukraine. This is no different from Taiwan. That is our key core fundamental. At the same time, I've also called for a permanent ceasefire, which includes the release of hostages and the repair of the Gaza Strip and humanitarian aid at this period of time. And so therefore, it is our role to utilize the negotiations and the diplomacy to the best extent possible to our allies abroad, because let us be reminded that we must promote democracy abroad while also having a deep sense of empathy and grace on the loss of humanitarian lives at the same time. But that is our deep commitment to democracies abroad, and we must not lose sight of that.
Thank you. Next question. With the rising cost of living, what policies would you advocate to ensure that both businesses and their employees can afford to live and work in our region without being forced to relocate? Mr. Lowe.
Thank you. We tackled some of these issues before, and I think so much of this is intertwined. Cost of living, that is a key core. This is not just rhetoric from me, but this is a lived experience and a value. I'm a millennial. I'm 41 years old, and I too myself speak very openly that I struggle to live in the community that I hope to represent, but I don't share that to seek sympathy. But this is not a unique experience to me, but for so many and for future generations to come. So on affordability, how do we make sure that we're getting individuals in their homes? I've altered legislation on teacher housing, helping to provide specifically housing for teachers in high cost of living areas. You referenced that of businesses, helping to make sure that we have living wages, not minimum wages. How do we make sure that we're increasing affordable housing, not just market rate housing, affordable housing? How do we expand healthcare access to all, universal access to the best extent possible that we can? How do we lower costs on goods and services, on prescription drugs and medications? These are all intertwined to the policies. And again, I submit to you and our viewers, who do we fight for? You'll have two different candidates to choose from. But as I reflected to you, I am endorsed by workers and unions, those that you just asked that key question. How do we support those who are making our economy thrive? And that's why the Teachers Association and the Plumbers Union and firefighters are supporting my candidacies, because I will help champion these issues in making an equitable society for everyone.
Thank you. Next question. With the rising cost of living, what policies would you advocate to ensure that both businesses and their employees can afford to live and work in our region without being forced to relocate? Mr. Liccardo.
Yeah, in my book, I talk about, in a couple of different chapters, one about housing and the other about a whole host of cost of living issues, from childcare to pharmaceuticals to groceries. Housing is clearly the big impediment, and we've got to find ways to be able to get housing built at a time right now, if you look at the Bay Area, there's virtually no multifamily housing getting built right now anywhere. The costs are all upside down. Builders aren't incentivized to do it because it doesn't, actually, they can't get lending even to start. So I go back to the first idea I mentioned, which is we need to have a way of retrofitting a lot of vacant space, and we've got a lot of it throughout the Bay Area, a lot of office space, particularly in the older buildings that have smaller floor plates that can be easily converted for more housing. And we've got to empower more homeowners who want to be part of providing a solution. In San Jose, we had great success in expanding ADUs where homeowners wanted to build them and provide federally backed financing to do that and provide more help for whether families want to expand housing for their grandparents or for their children or for strangers who simply want a place to rent. And then I talk in the book about a lot of other areas. For example, childcare. There's no question we need to go back to the larger expanded childcare tax credit. And in fact, I would also argue we need to expand the refundable dependent care tax credit that is really critical for families who are heavily burdened by caring for elders and for children.
Thank you. This next question is going to be our last question. I'm always surprised at how quickly the time goes by. And after this question, we will go to the closing question. So this question is, if elected, what is the first bill you will sponsor or co-sponsor and why? Mr. Liccardo.
The first bill I would co-sponsor or sponsor would be to eliminate what's called the IMD exclusion right now that exists in Medicaid law. It's been there since the 1960s. And it's a huge barrier for helping us get unhoused people into inpatient treatment for substance abuse or addiction rather, or for mental health reasons. That barrier is what is preventing many counties and many private hospitals from being able to offer a solution at scale for inpatient treatment. We do not have nearly enough inpatient beds in Santa Clara County or in San Mateo County to deal with the massive scale of the challenge we see every day on the street. And the reason is because the current IMD exclusion that I described prohibits any Medicaid reimbursement to a facility if they have more than 16 beds. Now, this is a remnant of the days, you may remember the movie One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, starring Jack Nicholson, when there were a lot of abuses in state hospitals. Well, we've come a long way since then. We've learned a lot. We need a solution that can scale for the tremendous pain and suffering we're seeing on our street and to help our communities be safer, because I know which communities are most afflicted by the risk of unhealthy people being out on the street, and that is our poorest communities who can afford it the least. So I want to do more to help our local communities address this crisis.
Thank you. This next question will be our last question, and then we'll go to the closing question. So the question is, if elected, what is the first bill you will sponsor or co-sponsor and why?
Well, I'm very keen on the proposal on comprehensive immigration reform that received bipartisan support, but was held up. I hope to be able to champion and be part of that conversation. I know you asked for one, but I'm also equally excited on helping to make sure that we get Kamala Harris into the White House because of note, one of the key platforms is to make sure that we in Congress send federal protections to enshrine reproductive freedom in the United States Constitution. I have done that in the state of California. I co-authored legislation to enshrine reproductive freedom vis-a-vis Proposition 1 in the state of California's Constitution. I would do the same thing in Congress and getting that to President Kamala Harris and making sure that we sign that into law.
Thank you. Now we're going to go to the closing question. What question do you wish we had asked in this forum that we didn't ask? Mr. Lowe.
Thank you very much. One question that I get a lot is, why did I receive the sole endorsement from the California Democratic Party when there are two candidates in this race who are registered Democrats? And what I share with you is that The Democratic Party understands the values that we bring. Within the Democratic Party, there is something called the Democratic Party platform, the values that we share. And the party and the activists well know that I am best equipped, that I have demonstrated that service at the local level as a former mayor of Campbell, as a state legislator for 10 years, as an author of constitutional protections for reproductive freedom, on making sure that we have Proposition 3 before us on enshrining more protections for even interracial marriage, that I have been there on the front lines advocating for basic protections of public safety, on the cost of living, on universal access to health care. And because of those principles, I've been so honored and blessed by this endorsement, because that endorsement speaks loudly, to be proud to be part of this Democratic Party ticket. So when the Democratic Party says, please vote top ticket all the way down for President Kamala Harris, they'll also say, please vote for Evan Lowe for Congress. I'm proud of the strong advocacy of that stamp of approval, and I'll make sure that I work so hard for everyday Americans in reflecting those democratic principles and values in Congress.
Thank you very much. You have 1.5 minutes. Mr. Liccardo.
I guess I would have hoped that you might ask, hey, what have you done about police accountability at a time when we've emerged just a few years from George Floyd's murder and a real reckoning over a lot of issues of policing in our country? And I think there is a real distinction here. I won't refer to my opponent's record, but I will say very clearly that I led efforts, 2020, for example, to take a measure to the ballot that expanded the authority of the independent police auditor to ensure that we could have independent review of excessive use of force cases, and particularly when there's injury resulting from that use of force. I was very proactive in ensuring that San Jose was a leader in providing records in response to the new law, SB 1421, which was supported by nearly every Democrat in the legislature, except a couple that are notable, and I won't refer to which ones, to ensure that records, for example, of sexual assault and excessive use of force and other kinds of incidents are released to the media, so that the public, which has a right to know, can understand which cops are still employed in their city's police departments and which are not. These basic oversight mechanisms are critical for the essence of a democracy. And I think there's a clear distinction between the candidates about who stands up for oversight and who stands with the police unions.
Thank you. I'm going to move to the moderator closing remarks now. On behalf of the League of Women Voters of Palo Alto and our co-sponsoring organizations, I would like to thank the candidates for their dedication in running for office and also for participating in this forum tonight. For the November 5th general election, the Santa Clara County Leagues are also hosting forums in many other races. Visit the League of Women Voters of Santa Clara County website, and you can also visit the Palo Alto League's website, LWVPaloAlto.org. And there you'll be able to find videos of those forums and other information. We also encourage you to visit vote411.org. There you will find nonpartisan, expanded information about candidates and ballot measures, and links to other sources of information about this upcoming election. For the November 5th general election, all California voters will receive vote-by-mail ballots, which were mailed starting on October 5th. We encourage you to vote early by mail or by dropping off your ballot at a secure ballot drop box. The locations of those drop boxes are listed on your ballot. You can also visit a vote center on or before Election Day. For example, if you need help filling out your ballot, or if you can't find it, or if you made a mistake in it, you can go to one of the vote centers. The locations of those centers and their hours of operation are also on your ballot. Please encourage your family, your friends, your neighbors, all to vote in this coming election. Thank you all very much. Do vote by November 5th. Good night.